I don't know any 18-year-old, if you go with their story that he said he was going to stay behind, I'm going to leave my cell phone behind. It's not adding up.
I don't know any 18-year-old who would voluntarily leave their cell phone behind. If the official story is that he chose to stay on that island while his friends took the boat back to shore, if that's what investigators are telling us happened, then someone needs to explain why his phone came back without him. Because that single detail, that one fact nobody disputes, is where the entire official narrative starts to fall apart. This is the story of Nolan Xavier Wells, an 18-year-old football player from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, who went to a barrier island with friends on the 4th of July in 2020 and never came home. His parents were handed an explanation by authorities, a version of events meant to close the case and quiet the questions. Instead, it opened a wound that brought the Knox, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Colin Kaepernick to a family that never wanted to be activists. They just wanted the truth about what happened to their son. What follows is not speculation. This is a claim-by-claim examination of what the family said, what officials said, and what the documented evidence actually shows. Because when you line up those three columns, when you compare the official story to the facts only a mother and father would know about their own child, the gaps become impossible to ignore. Before we go further, if this case matters to you, if you believe Nolan Wells deserves more than the explanation his family was given, do me one favor right now. Hit the like button on this video and subscribe to Mr. Story's Crime Vault. That simple action pushes this story in front of people who haven't heard his name yet. It keeps the questions alive while the evidence is still being gathered. It costs you nothing, and it might mean everything. Now, let's talk about what happened in the days after Independence Day 2020, and why two parents went on national television to say three words that changed everything. They're lying. The interview that brought this case into the national spotlight didn't happen in the immediate aftermath of Nolan's death. It came after his parents, Christine and Elmore Wells, had already buried their son. It came after they had already received the official explanation from the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. It came after they had already been told, in essence, that their child made a terrible decision and paid for it with his life. And it came after they had sat with that explanation long enough to know it didn't match the son they raised. Christine and Elmore appeared side by side, dressed in matching blue, their hands locked together. Attorney Ben Crump sat beside them, and for the first time since their son's body was recovered from the waters off Horn Island, they spoke at length about what they believe actually happened, not what they were told happened, what they know in their bones could not have happened the way officials described. Until that moment, nearly everything the public had heard about this case came from official sources: a sheriff at a podium, a coroner on the phone with reporters, press releases with case numbers stamped across the top. The Wells family was offering something different. They were offering the perspective of the two people who knew Nolan longer and more completely than anyone else connected to this investigation. Christine kept returning to the same phrase throughout the interview: "This was our baby boy." She wasn't saying it for sympathy. She was saying it as a statement of authority. She knew him, and what she was being told about him didn't add up. To understand why the family rejected the official account so completely, you need to know who Nolan was. Not the version that fits into a news report or a police statement, but the actual young man who woke up on July 4th, 2020, with plans and a future. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He stood 6 feet 1 inch tall. He played football, and he was good enough at it that Southwest Mississippi Community College had brought him in for the upcoming season. More than that, he had a Division I tryout scheduled for the Monday immediately following the 4th of July weekend. That's the Monday after the holiday. That's July 6th, 2020. Remember that date, because it's going to matter in a moment when we talk about decision-making and risk assessment. His parents described him as focused. His father called him a silent leader, the kind of kid other kids followed not because of what he said, but because of how he carried himself. Nolan wasn't loud. He didn't demand attention. He earned it through consistency, through showing up, through doing what he said he would do. The 4th of July trip was nothing unusual. Same group of friends, same destination, a barrier island they had visited before without incident. His father described it as something close to a last hurrah before the structure of school and football season took over again. There was no curfew discussed, no exact return time set. It was the kind of loose arrangement that exists in every household with an 18-year-old who has earned trust over time. Nolan left that morning with his friends, heading for Horn Island. Before we go any further, you need to understand what Horn Island actually is, because the location itself is critical to everything that follows. Horn Island is not a beach town. It's not a resort. It's not a place with lifeguards and concession stands and parking lots. Horn Island is a federally protected barrier island located roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast. It is uninhabited wilderness. There are no facilities, no drinking water, no shelters, no cell phone service. The only way to reach it is by private boat. It's a beautiful place to spend an afternoon. It's a dangerous place to spend a night alone. Because if you're on that island when the last boat leaves, you're not walking home. That's the place Nolan went with his friends on July 4th. And according to the official account, that's the place he chose to stay when his friends left. The first call came at 7 minutes past 11 on the night of July 4th. Christine Wells' phone lit up, and before she even answered, something inside her shifted. She would describe this later in the interview. She said she felt it before she heard the voice on the other end. And the reason she felt it was simple. The name on the screen wasn't Nolan's. It was one of the boys from the boat. Christine made a point of explaining why that mattered. Nolan's friends don't call her directly. That's not how it works. If there's a change of plans, if something comes up, Nolan calls. The fact that one of his friends was calling her phone, using his own number, bypassing Nolan entirely, registered as wrong before she even knew what the call was about. She answered, and the young man on the other end told her that Nolan had not come back with the group. He was still on the island. That call at 11:07 set off a cascade of events that would consume the next 48 hours. But before we walk through that timeline, there's something that needs to be said about the information environment around this case. There are claims all over the internet, theories, accusations, names thrown around with no evidence attached. This channel doesn't traffic in that. What you're hearing is what the family has said on the record, what officials have said on the record, and what named sources have confirmed. Nothing else. If it's not documented, it's not in this script. So here's what is documented. At 11:07 on the night of July 4th, Christine Wells received a call informing her that her son had not returned from Horn Island. According to the family and their attorney, the same young man who made that call also contacted the Coast Guard around that same time, though the family's attorney has noted there are now discrepancies surrounding that specific claim and its timing. Christine immediately started working multiple channels at once. She called a close family friend, another mother whose sons had grown up playing football with Nolan. She asked that mother to press the boys in the group directly for more detailed answers about what happened and why Nolan wasn't with them. At the same time, she was checking technology. The family used a location tracking service. Nolan's friends were trying to pull up his location on Snapchat, and between those two sources, the picture made no sense. Nolan's phone was showing up in one location, his car was somewhere else entirely. The pieces didn't fit together, and nobody was explaining why. While Christine was trying to figure out where her son actually was, she was also trying to do the most basic thing a parent can do in that situation: get law enforcement moving. And according to the family's account, that became its own nightmare. They described being bounced between agencies: the Sheriff's Department, Ocean Springs Police, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, which took Christine's information and then redirected her back to the city police. Eventually, Jackson County formally took the case. But by the time that happened, hours had already passed since that first call at 11:07. There's another detail in the timeline that matters, and it's been confirmed by local reporting. The first call to the Coast Guard came in on the night of July 4th. But formal Coast Guard assistance wasn't requested until around noon the following day. That's a gap of roughly 12 hours between the initial report and the full activation of the agency best equipped to conduct a water search. Understand what that gap means. For 12 hours, an 18-year-old was unaccounted for on an uninhabited barrier island with no resources, no communication, and no way to leave on his own. The clock was running, and the response, at least in those critical first hours, was fractured across multiple agencies trying to figure out whose job it was to find him. By the morning of July 5th, the search was real and it was large. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department announced it was working the case in coordination with the Department of Marine Resources, the Gulf Islands National Seashore, and the United States Coast Guard. Civilian volunteers from the United Cajun Navy joined the effort on the water. This was no longer a bureaucratic handoff. This was a full-scale search operation. Christine had posted a public plea for information in the early morning hours, sharing photos from the boat trip itself. In those images, Nolan towers over his friends, arms slung around their shoulders, smiling. The pictures show a kid having a good day with people he trusted. His parents didn't wait on shore. Elmore Wells went out to Horn Island that morning with Nolan's football coach. They took a boat and searched the shoreline themselves. They found nothing. The search continued into July 6th. And then, on the morning of that Monday, the Monday Nolan was supposed to be at a Division I tryout, a park ranger found a body in the water just off the island's northwestern tip. The following day, July 7th, the county coroner, Bruce Lind, confirmed through dental records that the body was Nolan Xavier Wells. The coroner said something in those initial statements that's important, because his language was more careful than what would come later from other officials. He said there were no immediate, obvious signs of trauma. Notice what that sentence does and doesn't say. It doesn't close the door. It doesn't rule anything out. It describes what was visible in an initial assessment, and then the coroner did exactly what he should have done. He requested a full autopsy at the state medical examiner's office so that trained specialists could determine whether there had been any foul play at all. In the coroner's own framing, that question was still open. The possibility of foul play had not been eliminated. It was being investigated. But that's not the message the public received. The explanation the family had been given, the explanation that Sheriff John Ledbetter described publicly in the days following the discovery, was clean and simple. Nolan chose to stay on the island. He planned to catch a ride back to the mainland later with a different group. From the people investigators talked to, it sounded like he stayed behind by choice, assuming another boat would bring him home. If that's true, if that's what happened, then Nolan Wells made a catastrophically bad decision and died because of it. Case closed. Tragic, but explainable. His mother's response to that explanation was immediate and absolute. No. Christine says Nolan was raised on one specific, repeated rule. If you leave somewhere with a group, you come back with that group. If you go with 5 people, you come home with 5 people. This wasn't a suggestion. This wasn't advice she offered once or twice. This was a rule she drilled into her children over and over again, specifically so they would remember it in the kind of moment where it mattered most. She went further than just restating the rule. She said that if she had been on that island herself in that situation, if Nolan had tried to tell her he was staying behind, she would have made him get on the boat. And if he pushed back, she would have handed him a phone right there so he could call his own parents and hear the same thing from them. She said she would never leave someone else's child behind, especially not on an island. When the interviewer asked her directly whether she believes her son was left behind rather than choosing to stay, her answer was one word: yes. Elmore's account lined up with Christine's, but he built it from a different angle. He talked about the years of specific conversations he'd had with Nolan about exactly this kind of situation. He says he drilled that group rule into his son for years. He told Nolan never to split off from his friends, not even chasing after a girl. He admits Nolan was probably tired of hearing it, but that was the point. Say it enough times, and when the moment comes, the lesson is already there. Elmore also came back to Nolan's character. He described his son as focused, as someone with a plan, and that plan was in motion. There was a Division I tryout on Monday. The football season was coming. Nolan's future was actively being built towards something specific. So if someone wants to tell this father that his son threw away the group rule on a whim, that he stayed on an island over a girl he had just met, abandoning everything he'd been taught and everything he was working toward, Elmore doesn't believe it. Not for a second. He's honest about the trap in that reasoning. Parents always want to believe the best about their children. But Elmore says that's exactly why he spent years preparing Nolan for the kind of moment where one bad decision, his own or somebody else's, could change everything. That's why the official version doesn't hold for him. His arithmetic is simple. It's 3 of them and 1 of him. Maybe there's friction, maybe there's an argument, maybe there's a physical altercation, but you get everybody back to the mainland. And then either you're still angry at each other tomorrow or you're friends again by the weekend. What you don't do, in his view, is leave somebody's child on an island, and you definitely don't leave him there without his phone. That phrase, without his phone, is where the official story picks up its first serious fracture. Because whatever else is disputed in this case, this much is not. When the boat came back to the mainland, on the night of July 4th, Nolan's phone came back on it. He did not. Think about that for a second. An 18-year-old in 2020, choosing to stay overnight in a remote location with no cell service, no resources, and no confirmed way home, voluntarily separating himself from his phone. Does that sound like any teenager you know? Does that sound like a decision someone makes when they're thinking clearly? But the phone issue goes deeper than just the fact that it came back without him. It's what was on the phone when it finally reached his family, or more accurately, what wasn't on it. According to Christine's account in the interview, the phone was returned to the family the following day, July 5th. That means for a stretch of hours, while Nolan was missing, the single most important piece of evidence in the case was in someone else's possession. When Christine finally had the phone in her hands, she and her sister went through it together. They found nothing, no saved photos, no saved videos, nothing at all from an entire 4th of July at the beach. Christine explained why that stopped her cold, and it's the kind of detail only a mother would have. Nolan lived on Snapchat. He sent her selfies throughout the day. A smile, a peace sign. "Hey mom," his hand, she joked, was practically attached to that phone. On a holiday, on a boat, with his friends. A kid like that generates a full day of pictures and videos. And she pointed to the timing. She and her sister opened that phone before the 24-hour mark, within the window when Snapchat content, if it existed, should still have been sitting there waiting to be saved. Her sister checked a second account, also empty. For Christine, this wasn't just unusual, it was close to impossible. The phone came home from a 4th of July trip holding nothing, and her conclusion, stated clearly through the family's attorney, is that content was deleted from Nolan's phone before it ever reached her hands. That is an allegation. No agency has confirmed it. No one has been accused by name of doing it. But it is now the emotional and evidentiary core of the family's case. Christine says outside experts are working to recover the deleted messages and the vanished content. If they succeed, if data can be pulled from that phone showing what was there before it was erased, the entire case changes. But the phone isn't the only contradiction the family is pointing to. There's also the story about the girl. According to Christine, the very first explanation she was given for why Nolan stayed behind involved a young woman. She was told the girl's name was Katie. In this version, Nolan wanted to stay on the island to spend time with her. But Christine says that in that same initial conversation, she was also told two other things. Nobody in the group actually knew who this girl was, and the girl was missing too. Take that in. The explanation for why an 18-year-old separated from his friends rests entirely on one person, and in the first version his mother received, that person was unknown to everyone in the group and unaccounted for herself. The story evolved from there, but not in a way that clarified anything. According to the family's attorney, Ben Crump, the young woman Nolan was reportedly talking with that afternoon has given a statement. She says that Nolan told her he was heading back to the boat to rejoin his friends. Meanwhile, the friends are reported to have said the opposite. They claim Nolan told them he wanted to stay behind with her. Crump's response to that has been direct. Which is it? Both of those sentences cannot be true at the same time. Someone's memory is wrong, or someone's story is. And as of right now, no official account has resolved that contradiction. There's one more thing from the interview that needs to be included, because Christine addressed it head-on. Some of the online reaction to this case has fixated, in ugly terms, on the composition of Nolan's friend group. In the photos from that day, he appears to be the only black teenager on the boat. Christine's response was clear. She said she and her husband would never tell any of their children who they could be friends with based on the color of their skin. She said Nolan's heart was big enough to be a friend to everybody, and that the support pouring in, including from Nolan's own friends, reflects exactly how he was raised. If anyone has a problem with that, she said, the problem is theirs. Her focus, and her husband's focus, in every interview they have given has stayed locked on one thing: what happened during the hours their son was unaccounted for. Not the speculation, not the internet noise. The facts. And the facts as they stand include this: a phone that came back empty. A story about staying behind that contradicts the core rule Nolan was raised on. A young woman whose account doesn't match the friend's account. Location data that didn't line up. A 12-hour gap before full search resources were activated, and two parents who are not activists, who never wanted to be on television, who are simply refusing to accept an explanation that does not survive contact with what they know about their son. The case drew national attention fast. The Knot got involved. Reverend Al Sharpton spoke publicly in support of the family. Colin Kaepernick funded a second independent autopsy, conducted in Washington, D.C. At the time of the interview, results from that second autopsy were expected any day. What started as a local tragedy in Mississippi became something larger. Not because the family wanted it to, because the official story had too many holes. Two parents sat side by side, hands locked together, and told the country that the explanation they were given for their son's death does not add up. They're not asking people to take their word for it. They're asking people to look at the timeline, look at the phone, look at the contradictions, and then ask the same questions they're asking. Why did the phone come back without him? Why was it empty? Why did the stories about the girl not match? Why was there a 12-hour delay in the search response? Why does the official version require you to believe that an 18-year-old with a Division I tryout 2 days away, raised on a specific rule about staying with your group, would voluntarily abandon his friends, leave his phone behind, and stay overnight on an uninhabited island with no plan and no way home? The family is not saying they know exactly what happened. They're saying the official explanation is not what happened, and they're asking for a real investigation into what did. As of right now, data recovery specialists are working to pull deleted content from Nolan's phone. A second autopsy has been completed, with results pending. The family has retained Ben Crump, one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the country, and the questions are still out there, unanswered. This is not a closed case. This is a case where the official story was handed down, and a family said no, and then they went public with the reasons why. Right now, somewhere online, people are arguing about this young man as if he were a hashtag instead of a son. His mother has to see that every day. So if this case matters to you, if you think Nolan Xavier Wells deserves better than the explanation his family was given, take 1 second and drop his name in the comments. Just his name, Nolan Wells, plainly and with respect. Let this comment section be one place on the internet where he's remembered as a person first, not a controversy. And if you want to stay with this case as it develops, if you want to be here when the second autopsy results come in, when the data recovery findings are released, when the next piece of this puzzle comes to light, subscribe to Mr. Story's Crime Vault and hit the like button on this video. That's how this story reaches the people who need to hear it. That's how Nolan's name stays in front of the public while the investigation is still active. It takes 2 seconds, and it makes a difference. Here is where precision matters. So let's be precise. Deleting something from a phone rarely destroys it. Data survives at multiple levels within a device, levels that a proper forensic examination can reach. And the data exists beyond the device entirely. Text messages pass through carrier networks. Platforms like Snapchat maintain their own records, which means investigators, or the family's own legal team, can pursue those records with subpoenas regardless of what remains on the physical handset itself. In other words, if messages were deleted from Nolan's phone, that fact is likely provable. And if they were not deleted, that is provable too. This particular dispute, unlike so much else in this case, has a definitive answer waiting somewhere in a server log or a forensic report. It's not a matter of opinion. It's not about who you believe. It's about what the data shows. Which raises a question that one legal analyst after another has now asked publicly. Why does it appear that none of the fast-track tools available in a missing person case were used on this phone in the first days? Emergency data requests, early forensic warrants, the mechanisms that exist specifically to preserve evidence before it disappears. Those tools are standard in cases like this. And as of right now, nothing in the public record indicates they were deployed here. That question has not been answered. And there's a newer wrinkle that fairness requires mentioning, because it cuts toward the family for once, instead of away from them. Sheriff John Ledbetter told ABC News that as of this past weekend, the family's legal team has not yet turned Nolan's phone over to his investigators. Ben Crump's response was direct. The family intends to hand it over after their own independent examination is complete. You can understand both positions. A family that distrusts this investigation wants its own experts to examine the evidence first. Investigators cannot resolve the deleted messages question without access to the device. But it means that the most disputed object in this entire case currently sits outside the official investigation entirely. And every day that continues, the questions compound. Keep all of that in mind for when we get to how professionals are grading this investigation, because the phone custody issue is just one item on a list that keeps growing. There is also a piece of video in this case, and it may be the most contested object after the phone itself. A clip has circulated widely online, reportedly recorded on or near the island that day, appearing to capture some kind of argument or confrontation. The family's attorney has described audio in which a voice he attributes to Nolan protests about his phone, words to the effect of, "Where is my phone? What are you doing with my phone?" But here is the part that has to be reported straight, because getting it wrong would be doing exactly what this channel exists not to do. Ben Crump's own certainty about that audio has not been consistent. Pressed directly in one interview about whether the voice has actually been confirmed as Nolan's, he stopped short, saying only that kids were talking and that some kind of argument was clearly happening. In a separate appearance alongside the parents, he described the same audio with more confidence, as confirmed to be Nolan protesting that his friends had his phone. Those two versions of his own certainty do not fully match, and that inconsistency is part of the record now too. And now that video has a second account attached to it, and it points in the opposite direction. Tristan Shepard, a 20-year-old longtime friend of Nolan's who says he has given an official statement to investigators, told ABC News that the voice in that viral clip is not Nolan's at all. It's his. By Shepard's account, the argument caught on camera was his own, a confrontation with a stranger that others were pulling him away from. It involved no phone, and Nolan was not on that part of the island when it happened. Another friend, Javon Williams, has separately disputed the audio identification too, saying it did not sound like Nolan. Shepard went further about the friend group itself, saying nobody in it would ever have hurt Nolan, that they would have done anything for him, and that he and his friends have been besieged by death threats since the body was found. He declined to appear on camera out of fear for his safety. So weigh what this section actually holds. The family's attorney hears Nolan in that video, with a certainty that has itself wavered between interviews. Two named friends say the voice belongs to someone else, and one of them says the argument is his own story, not Nolan's. Those accounts cannot all be right, and nothing official has resolved them. What remains beyond dispute is one fact, because it comes from the investigators themselves. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has publicly asked anyone who was on or near the northwest tip of Horn Island that day to submit original, unedited photos and videos, and its own press release specifically requested footage, quote, depicting alleged altercations or believed to include Nolan Wells. Read that twice. The same office that said early on it saw no evidence of foul play is in writing asking the public for pictures of an alleged altercation involving this specific young man. Both of those things are true at once. Squaring them is the sheriff's burden, not ours. Then there is the question of the water itself, and this section has to be played absolutely straight because both sides of it are real. The family's attorney has raised a pointed question. Nolan was a college athlete in superb condition, and by every account his parents give, a strong swimmer. Horn Island on the 4th of July was not empty wilderness. It's a popular holiday destination, and that day there were boats and people along its beaches. Crump's question is simple. If Nolan was struggling in that water in daylight on a crowded holiday, how did nobody see it? How did nobody help? As of tonight, no witness has publicly come forward describing Nolan in visible distress in the water. And now the other side, because it deserves equal weight. Being a strong swimmer does not rule out drowning. Drowning is fast, it's quiet, and it almost never looks the way people imagine. There is often no shouting, no waving, no dramatic splash. Courage is the magical key that opens up new worlds. And in this specific case, at least one rescue coordinator involved in the volunteer search effort has described a genuinely strong rip current in that exact area on that day. Both facts stand. A crowded beach where no one reported seeing a struggle, and water conditions that could take a strong swimmer silently. Neither one on its own answers what happened to Nolan Wells. That is precisely why the autopsies matter so much. Before we get to where those stand, there is one more claim from the family's account, and it's small, specific, and unlike everything else in this story, checkable with a photograph. Christine says that after she posted publicly asking for information, a young woman reached out to her, someone who had been on the island that same day with her own photos to prove it. This young woman told Christine that the official report described Nolan wearing black shorts. But in her photographs from that afternoon, Christine says Nolan is wearing blue, and she says the young woman sent her those photos directly. Understand why this detail of all things has traveled so far. Black and blue are not colors you confuse in a photograph. This is not a grieving relative misremembering a chaotic night, and it's not an anonymous rumor. It is, if the family's account holds, a documented image contradicting an official report on a simple, physical, verifiable fact. It proves nothing about how Nolan died. What it does is raise a question about care, about how precisely the earliest information in this investigation was gathered. Because if the easy details were recorded wrong, the public is entitled to ask about the hard ones. That is the same question the professionals are now asking. Since the parents' interview aired, legal analysts covering this case have raised a consistent set of concerns, and they are worth laying out cleanly as commentary from people outside the investigation, but people who know what one is supposed to look like. First, the phone gap. The boys called Nolan's mother at 11:07 at night. The phone did not reach the family until the next day. In any investigation, one analyst noted that overnight window is exactly where evidence tends to be lost or altered, and basic questions about it remain publicly unanswered. Were the friends asked whether anything was deleted? Was the phone examined by anyone before it changed hands? Were the most ordinary early interview questions? Had anyone changed clothes? Did anyone have scratches or marks consistent with a physical altercation? Even asked in those first conversations. Nothing public says they were, and nothing public says they were not. That silence is the point. One analyst pushed the logic a step further. If there was a recorded argument over that phone, and the group then left the island carrying it while its owner never came home, the phone's journey alone raises legal questions. And if anything was deleted from it during those hours of possession, that could support an argument of evidence tampering, regardless of whether the deleted content itself ever turns out to matter. Second, the early forensics. Analysts have pointed out that in a missing person case, law enforcement has emergency tools. Exigent circumstance requests that compel carriers and platforms to preserve and produce data fast. From everything publicly known, it is unclear whether any of that happened in the first days here. One analyst put his own experience on the table. He has helped build a murder case entirely out of deleted text messages recovered from a phone. Deletion, he said, hides data. It rarely destroys it. Third, the friends. The young men who were on that boat have retained legal counsel, and the family's own attorney says he has not spoken with them for exactly that reason. That is their absolute right, and it implies nothing on its own. People retain lawyers in high-profile cases for many reasons. And in this case, at least one documented reason is self-protection from the internet itself. Death threats, by Shepard's account. What it means practically is that the people who were physically with Nolan in his final hours have given no direct account to the family's team, though that wall has now cracked in public with Shepard speaking to national press and confirming he gave investigators an official statement. His account and the family attorney's account of the same video flatly disagree. A jury may one day be asked to choose between them. The public should not choose yet. Fourth, the sheriff's words. The statement that drew the most professional criticism in this entire case was the early announcement that no foul play was suspected, issued before any cause of death existed. Multiple analysts, and notably a veteran big city police chief consulted in national coverage, have said the same thing. That may have been a poor choice of words. The same chief, it should be said, cut in both directions. He also cautioned that anyone speculating or jumping to conclusions before the autopsy results exist is doing the family a disservice, and that toxicology genuinely does take weeks. Fairness requires both halves of that. The accurate version, that there were no immediate obvious signs of trauma, which is what the county coroner actually described, closes no doors. The version that went out closed one in the public's mind, and much of the anger around this case traces to that single sentence. And fifth, the statement from one of the boys' mothers, who happens to be a sitting Jackson County judge. She published her own detailed public account defending her son, laying out his timeline, and saying he has fully cooperated with law enforcement. She has also said her family has been targeted by rumors and that she fears for her children's safety. And on that point, she deserves to be taken at her word, because no one in that friend group has been accused of anything by any authority. One analyst simply observed that a public official building a public record that early is itself a notable feature of this case. Nothing more, and nothing more should be read into it here. And one prediction has come up across nearly every panel. Whatever the criminal investigation concludes, more than one analyst expects this case to eventually reach a civil courtroom, a wrongful death or negligence claim, where the standards of proof are lower, and where questions like the phone's chain of custody stop being talking points and become exhibits. Institutionally, the list of who has attached themselves to this case explains its gravity. United States Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi has publicly urged a full, transparent, and timely investigation. The Mississippi Knox echoed him, citing what it called deeply concerning contradictions in the initial accounts. And its Jackson County chapter president has walked a careful line, promising to ensure the tragedy is fully investigated, while openly asking the public not to reach conclusions before the facts are in. Nolan's schools have spoken too. Ocean Springs, where he starred, described itself as shocked and heartbroken. His head coach remembered a young man whose character, in his words, spoke louder than his accomplishments. The president of Southwest Mississippi Community College said the entire campus family was mourning and put counselors in place for the teammates Nolan was supposed to rejoin that same week. A fundraiser started by a family friend, now managed by Christine herself, is carrying the family's costs alongside help from Colin Kaepernick and from Tyler Perry, who is covering the funeral. Whatever the investigation ultimately finds, that outpouring is its own testimony about who this 18-year-old was to the people who actually knew him. So where does all of it actually stand tonight? The state's autopsy has been performed. Its findings, cause, and manner of death remain unreleased because the medical examiner is waiting on toxicology, and toxicology takes days or weeks. Investigators have said they suspect a drowning, but nothing official has been ruled. The independent autopsy, performed in Washington, D.C. by a pathologist the family chose specifically for having no ties to Mississippi law enforcement, is complete. Its results were expected days ago, delayed by the attorney's account over canceled flights, and are now expected imminently. When those two reports exist side by side, this case changes shape one way or the other. On Friday, the family stood in New York beside Reverend Sharpton and their legal team and made their appeal to the country directly. Christine, in the words that led national coverage, said, "We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home." She has been open about what this is costing her. A mother trying to protect her family's peace, while strangers treat her son's death as a spectacle to argue about. And even in that state, her instinct was protective in every direction. Told that protests had begun back home in Ocean Springs, organized by Nolan's own friends, she asked that anyone marching keep it peaceful. Because her son, she said, was never someone who liked fights, and he would not want that done in his name. Sheriff John Ledbetter continues to say his office has found no evidence of a crime, while also acknowledging in his own words that people want answers faster than a careful investigation can produce them. His office's request for photos and videos from the island remains open. The family's attorney, for his part, has raised the question of whether the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation should take this case over from the county entirely. No criminal charges have been filed against anyone. Nothing you have heard tonight changes that, and nothing here should be read as an accusation against any individual. But step back to the one question this family put on the table, because it is the question this entire case now orbits. They were handed an explanation. He chose to stay, and against that explanation now stands everything they have assembled. A phone that came home without him, and by his mother's account, came home empty. A girl no one in the group could identify. Two versions of Nolan's last conversation that cannot both be true. A photograph that allegedly contradicts the official description of what he wore, and a search that lost its first hours to a jurisdictional runaround. None of that proves what happened on Horn Island. So be scrupulous about the two piles this story sorts into. Verified. Nolan went out with the group and did not come back. His phone did. His body was recovered 2 days later, and no cause of death has been released. The sheriff's office is actively soliciting footage of an alleged altercation, claimed and still unproven. The deleted messages, the contradicting photograph, and the identity of the voice on that video, which is now actively disputed on the record by two of Nolan's own friends. Unverified entirely and disputed by a named participant. The viral secondhand party claims flooding social media. The family is not confusing those piles, and neither should anyone covering this case. Notice too what the parents have never actually done in any of these interviews. They have not named a person. They have not offered a theory of how their son died. What they have said consistently in every appearance is narrower and harder to dismiss. The story they were handed does not match the son they raised. And until somebody can close that gap in a way that holds together, they intend to keep asking questions in public, whether that is comfortable for anyone in Jackson County or not. What they are asking for is not a verdict. It is an investigation that can survive its own contradictions. Until the toxicology returns, until the two autopsies speak, until the deleted data question gets its definitive answer, this case stays open, and so does this channel's coverage of it. That is the promise, and it is the whole reason to subscribe to Mr. Story's Crime Vault. When the independent autopsy results drop, when the state's findings are released, when anything in that phone is recovered, we will break it down here. Verified the moment it is real. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss it, because those updates could come any day now, and they will change the entire direction of this story.